There was a time before Minneapolis was a city that it was actually a destined destination. It was because of not just a river, but a falls that it was all formed. See, it all started with a man named Washburn. He was quite a visionary, quite a leader in many respects.
He was a Civil War general and led a group of volunteers from Wisconsin during the Civil War, so he certainly had to be a man of great adjustment during his life.
Yeah, he had business aspirations too. Growing up in Wisconsin, he found the flour mill was the ticket to financial freedom. And what he needed was right here, a waterfall to power the project. He found it, and the rest is history. And oh, what a history it is. See, it started as a flour mill because of what else? The marketplace.
This was the perfect spot. It was next to a natural source of power, the power of the Mississippi River in St. Anthony Falls, and it was at the end of the railroad lines coming from the Great Plains, which were at the time being opened up for settlement. And so western Minnesota, North Dakota, South Dakota, eastern Montana, millions of acres of land that did a really good job of growing wheat.
The building now stands as a monument, the Mill City Museum. It has its own story to tell. It became a flour mill after the first flour mill went terribly wrong.
This building is built on the piece of land where an earlier flour mill was that blew up in May of 1878. One of the greatest disasters in the history of the city. 18 people died. 14 of them were working in the mill here on this piece of land. 4 others died in the surrounding mills, which were also destroyed. And instantly, more than a third of the city's flour milling capacity was destroyed.
When they rebuilt it, it thrived. It became the focal point of a city that lived on the river, and the settlement quickly became a thriving metropolis.
The reason the city grew was because of the industries that came about as a result of that natural source of power. First, sawmilling, and then later, flour milling. What the early explorers had predicted would be an eternal supply of white pine in northern Minnesota, it was almost all gone in about 40 or 50 years, and so the flour milling, the wheat was a renewable source of every year to come in.
An estimated 1,000 workers called this their vocation home. It was where they came every day to make flour.
There's a conveyor comes across the roof, so the grain that's come out of the rail cars that came into the building every day from Montana and North Dakota and western Minnesota, the grain would be lifted up in something called a bucket elevator, which is like a vertical conveyor belt with buckets attached that would scoop up the wheat, bring it all the way up to the top of the building, and then a conveyor belt across the roof would dump that grain into this round hopper at the top.
This was not always run-of-the-mill type work. With big machines came risk, and some new businesses popping up because of it.
Well, it's no mistake that at the same time that Minneapolis was the flour milling capital of the world, Minneapolis was also the world's leader in the manufacturing of artificial limbs.
Really, they went hand in hand, pardon the pun, huh?
That's very good, yeah.
Just across the river was another family business with the familiar name and similar ideas.
The east side of the river was dominated by the Pillsbury mill. The Pillsbury family came from New Hampshire originally. They were in the hardware business to start with, which was a good business to be in because everybody who came here had to build their own house and their own, and so they made a lot of money doing that, and then got into the flour milling business, and within about 10 years they had the biggest flour mill in the world.
When General Mills took over, they eventually decided to shut it down in the mid-60s. And when they did, the river was left almost by itself.
Washburn's company eventually became General Mills.
Yeah.
And General Mills ran the mill here until 1965. And by the mid-60s, General Mills had changed the whole focus. They were focusing their attention on things that are a lot more profitable. They became a food products company.
What followed after the devastating fire was a think outside the box suggestion, one that would again revive the River District.
There were talks between the head of the Minnesota Historical Society and the mayor's office and the fire chief, and they came up with the idea just to sort of let things be for a while and see if a plan could come up, and then a new building was constructed inside the burned out stone shell that was left.
Today stands the museum, where you can learn not just about a flour mill, but about a city.
We get about Between 40 and 45,000 school visitors here a year. It's a popular destination for school field trips. As part of that, they all take an hour-long, 45-minute-long class, and then we have the Flower Tower, which is a multimedia ride on a 35-passenger freight elevator up and down through 7 floors of a recreation of a flour mill.
Take the elevator up to the observation deck and you feel like history is unfolding in front of your eyes. What once was, still is, to an extent. A riverfront that was the center point is being revitalized. When you see the water roaring over the falls, you realize it is this particular piece of river that is the reason Minneapolis exists at all.
But what we forget is, right there, that water, that power is the reason Minneapolis exists.
Absolutely. It's the only natural waterfall on the entire course of the Mississippi River. And the Mississippi is a very flat river. Lake Itasca is less than 1,800 feet above sea level. So the entire drop of 2,300 miles is less than 1,800 feet. It's about 7 or 8 inches a mile a drop on average. And here in downtown Minneapolis, it drops about 50 feet all in one place.
And that is why Minneapolis,
that is absolutely
right there
the
is why
reason.
Minneapolis was built.
That's correct.
And we forget about it every day, don't we?
That's right.
And the Mill City Museum is more than a reminder of history. It has a contemporary feel.
We do have many weddings here almost every Friday and Saturday from April till October. It's an outdoor venue that's inside these historic walls, set up chairs and whatever else the couple wants inside this space. And then inside the building we have open space that can be used for dinners, receptions, banquets, that sort of thing.
It is a building that really reminds you of the roots, how one industry and one person helped change the landscape, took the state to the 20th century.
There was only one reason to have a settlement, to have a city in this place, and that was because there was a natural source of power here. There was not a natural source of transportation to here. St. Paul was the end of transportation on the upper Mississippi. But they made a settlement here because you could make power here by capturing the flow and the drop of that water from the Mississippi River.
And 150 years later, that water and this city are still going strong.
Is it fun to see the river reinvigorated
Oh.
and what the river means to this
Absolutely.
town? And now Minneapolis is building around the riverfront and that sense of history is back?
I can't tell you the number of times that people have said to me up here on this observation deck, I've lived here my whole life and I had no idea.
Yeah, here it is.
Here it is.
Life to the Max is brought to you by Life Touch. Photography for a lifetime.